What's up, everybody? It's your man J-Rock coming at you with a special edition of the J-Rock Show post-commitment day special, and I am joined by my good brother, Siege. Long time no see you, man.
Long time no see, back in the J-Rock Show. Where else would I want to be today? Come on.
Absolutely, man, absolutely. And, final day of the commitment period. Commitment day was yesterday. A lot of recruiting classes, taking shape. I'll start off with you. What is one team that you were really impressed by or surprised by, say, on the recruiting trail this offseason?
Let's see. Impressed and surprised. Two very different things to me. I mean, you could go with the low-hanging fruit in Davidson. This is by far the best recruiting class they've brought in their program's history with Benari and Nick Hugo. But one team I was actually, I would say, more surprised about the South Carolina Gamecocks.
Okay.
I actually like what they did. I like what they brought in. They didn't necessarily get they didn't bring in any world beaters, any guys that you look at and you're like, this guy's gonna, be able to take them all the way. They brought in two guys, very small class, but the guys they brought in Isaiah James and Keandre Baldridge, both very good defenders. Baldridge is a great low post scorer, and I think they needed a little bit of that. I think these guys are both going to be instant impact. They both already know how to play a role coming from those Southeast Select and Beast of the East programs that are very team-oriented, very kind of play your role, do your thing, play hard. And they both fit a specific role very well. So I really liked South Carolina picking those guys up, spending time recruiting the guys who have become specialists and have become good at what they do and can bring value in that area, not try to be superstars. So I really liked the way that head coach Lamont Paris attacked this offseason and attacked this recruiting class, bringing in those two guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And Baldridge, big, one of the higher ranked commits in the state of South Carolina. That was definitely a very important pick for them. And, like you said, they very much recruited by skill sets or by specialty. And a lot of times that's what it should be, not just, the number of stars behind your name or if you were a superstar at the prep level or not. It's all about when building out a roster is building out by specialties and fits.
Absolutely. And look, J-Rock, we've been spitting the good gospel for a while now that can get you to the next level. Isaiah James, and this is no shade on Isaiah James, but Isaiah James is not necessarily an all-around star by any means. He's not. His offensive game has a lot of growth that it needs, but he's a specialist. He found, he realized, he was aware, I'm not a Cooper Flagg. I'm not a Japheth Towns. I'm not even a Gabe Pope who's a little more complete than him. What I am is a damn good defender. And I'm going to become the best defender I can possibly be. And you see him get an offer to a SEC school here in South Carolina, and he very likely will get good minutes in his first year because he can defend really well. And I think it just goes to show you, J-Rock, if you're at the prep level and you're not necessarily, a world beater like those guys I just named, work on your craft, work on your specialty because schools will notice. So shout out Isaiah James and shout out Lamont Paris for this class he brought in.
Yeah, definitely. Specialties are huge. And like another guy, I'll throw out there, Jetson Halliday. Maybe not, an all-around complete defender, not every aspect 3-level type scorer, but he can shoot the ball. And so, that's another example you could kind of work into that context. Am I right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Jetson Halliday is a great example of that. There's a lot of guys. Let's be real, J-Rod. There are more guys who are examples of that than guys who are examples of Cooper Flaggs and Japheth Towns. There's a reason that those guys are called superstars, and it's because there's not a whole lot of them. You know what I mean? And if you're not one of those guys, 100%. Find out what you're good at and work on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of moving on to the next class I wanted to talk about, and I think really was one of the big shocks biggest shockers of the entire, recruiting cycle, St. Mary's and Coach Randy Bennett. I think, no question, this recruiting class, they are in the top 25. They should be in the SWB top 25 recruiting classes with this one, which I believe would be the first time in their school's history. But I mean, you go out and you get Kai Newby, which I don't think anybody expected. I think he steps in and instantly is your top option on offense. Needed some size, so Bennett went out and got Brendan Romine, an in-state commit. Dime Hardaway, after battling some injuries, had a lot of Power 5 offers, got hurt, and then St. Mary's decided to take a chance on him, and I think he's going to fit in very nicely for the Gales.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, like you said, it's a school that doesn't necessarily have a history of being a top recruiting class, and I am excited to see some of the major outlets kind of come out with their rankings on these recruiting classes. I think St. Mary's has really Kai Newby alone puts them in the conversation to have a top recruiting class, in my opinion. A very underrated player, brought him in, and what they got in Kai Newby is a guy who can be their guy, a guy who maybe is not a superstar on the level of Cooper Flagg or Japheth Towns or even a D'Angelo Jordan or Arthur Lattimore, but what he is, he's a damn good scorer, J-Rock. He's a really, really good scorer, and he is going to open up an offense no matter where he is. He's going to open up an offense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, without question, and I think I could see Newby also kind of being somewhat of a late bloomer in a sense as well. One of those rare cases. I mean, don't get me wrong. The last 2 years in SimWorld Prep was the guy for, SimWorld Asia Pacific. But I think if you go back to the race to one last season, where APAC made that Cinderella run all the way to the Final Four, you saw him kind of step up and really take that next step, I guess you could say, as being a number one option, albeit at the prep level. And I think we saw more consistency from him this past, SimWorld Prep season, which was a big thing I know I was looking for with him.
Yeah, I mean, look, like we said, he's got a lot of development to do. That's something I think people forget. Most of these guys are not complete players when you go to college. Very rarely are you going to find a complete player, but you can find a guy who has a lot of growth that he can do, a lot of size with Kai Newby, 6'5", can play like a guard. I'm excited to see the St. Mary's team and what they can do. I think they brought in a good class. It's not, like we said, it's not the best class in the country by any means. But to be honest, they surprised me a little bit. They went after recruits out there in California. They got a good few of them. They got a couple of them, and then they got a great international prospect who, if you can get your hand on an international prospect, it's usually a pretty good bet if you can bring them over to SimWorld U.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, I definitely look for St. Mary's to contend for a conference championship and make a run or make an appearance in Basketball Bedlam. And the next school is another school that you don't ever really see or haven't ever really seen in this conversation of top recruiting classes as well. It's the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Coach Steve Picciel, I mean, you return Kamari and Goodyear, Tyrone Snyder, Justin Solomon, Darian Weatherspoon, all quality players from last season. And then in this cycle, you bring in Dylan Harper, not just one of the best guards, but one of the best players, that was in all of SimWorld Prep this past season, and started a little bit of a potential pipeline between Rutgers and Philadelphia Elite, maybe, as he went out and got, two great defenders in Orland Mock III and Jermaine Owens, and then another in-state commit in Cootie Zoe. When you look at Rutgers, what stands out to you the most about this recruiting class?
What Rutgers did, and it's very smart, I think more coaches and more programs need to take note of something like this. They went out, and not everyone can go get a Dylan Harper, but they got a Dylan Harper. World beater, can do almost everything, great scorer. He will make sure their offense is up to par, right? And what they did was they went and they surrounded him with really, really good defenders. Orland Mock one of the better perimeter defenders in all of prep ball in the country. Jermaine Owens, sensational big defender. They surrounded this team with defense is what they did. Now, my concern with Rutgers would be where's the shooting necessarily coming from around Dylan Harper, but if you can defend, you got a chance. And that's really a lot of what happens at the college level. Defense is so important. And they made sure that next to this All-American superstar, Dylan Harper, they got guys who can defend.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I like you said, I like the kind of defensive-minded approach that they took when looking at, recruits in the cycle. But like you said, that is also an area that concerns me with them. And I mean, even as great as good as Dylan Harper is, you still cannot expect him to come in and be, you cannot expect him and guarantee 100%, lay your money down on it and bet that he will have the same numbers that he did in SimWorld Prep. Because you got to remember, going from the prep level to the university level, entirely different ball game.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The pace is different. The skill level you go ahead against is different. The athleticism is different. It's literally a whole different ball game.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's just the thing I think with Rutgers is kind of the same situation in a sense that he had in Indy. Who will be that sort of next guy up behind him? Will it be a Kamarian Goodyear? Will, say, an Orlin Mock or a Cootie Zoe kind of be that number two guy? I mean, that is something that I think will definitely be interesting to see as Rutgers, goes about this season in the Big Ten Conference.
Absolutely, but what I do know is they have got a better shot at a good season than they've had in a long time. So shout out Rutgers.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely have Rutgers as a contending pick in the Big Ten. And another Big Ten school I wanted to look at with you, Siege, the Michigan Wolverines. New head coach Dusty May goes out and recruits a former teammate of sophomore Lorenzo Phenom and Samuel Balgas, pulls Carlos Buffini from SimWorld Europe. When you look at kind of how they built things, do you still see the offense this next season kind of being built around Phenom, or do you see
Absolutely.
kind of a more open approach?
Yes, I still think it's absolutely built around Phenom. He was too good last year to not have it be built around him. His game, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. He's the kind of player who has a game that is more fit to the SimWorld U level than it was to SimWorld Prep. Now, he was really good in SimWorld Prep, but he was on another level this past season in SimWorld U. So, yes, to me, it absolutely is still built around him. I think what they did by going to get a guy like Buffini, that adds some shooting. Balgas can shoot and he can facilitate. They got a couple other guys in this class, but I think what they did, they got a couple more shooters to surround him with, because obviously you have a year like that, teams are going to begin keying in on you more, and they're looking forward to that happening. So they also went and got a guy like Balgas who can facilitate really well, can score at all three levels, and he can be that true second guy next to Lorenzo Phenom and that guy who feeds him the ball with ease. So to me, there's no question in my mind that he's absolutely still the undisputed number one for that Michigan team.
Yeah, I agree. I could very well see that as well. And kind of throwing it back to you, Siege, is there another school that kind of really stood out for you?
Another team that I really liked what they did would be, I'm actually, and this one might be a little slept on, but I really like what Oregon did. I like what they did. They didn't necessarily go get a superstar. They didn't go get a world beater, but you mentioned him earlier in the show. Jetson Holiday, he's on his way to play at Oregon. They got Timothy Brown, a supreme athlete, an athlete whose athletic ability does match up with the standard of SimWorld U and maybe surpasses it. A shooter in Jetson Holiday who can also defend well. Joe King Jr., kind of a versatile big guard at 6'5". This is one of those classes that you don't look at and you think of them as a top 25 class even necessarily. They might not be. It might not be a top 25 class. It depends on who you ask. It depends on what website you're looking at, right? But
Right.
to me, I think this class could have a top 25 impact just in the versatility of it, the depth of the class, and it's a lot of versatile players. So to me, they opened up the possibilities of what style they can play with the guys they brought in. And to me, that's always a good thing when you can do that.
Yeah, without question, the most versatile teams, are usually the more successful ones. And kind of reversing the side of the tracks here, Siege, what school, is there a particular school that you saw that you were maybe disappointed by in this recruiting cycle? I mean, obviously the big one would be, Missouri would be the main one to come to anybody's mind. But
Yep.
what's another school that you see kind of really let you down on the recruiting trail?
J-Rock, that's a good question. And I'd have to say a team, because there's a lot of teams that I don't think had that great of a recruiting period, right? But what team did I have higher expectations for that maybe let me down a little bit? I got one that I think about a lot, and that's UCLA. UCLA is already stacked with talent, but they brought in 3 freshmen, and Franklin Tyson and Mitchell Marison Cole are the 2 notable ones. Now, they did need size, so I think they went and got what they needed. But when you look at a team, when you think about a team like UCLA, it's a blue blood. They usually have a lot of success on the recruiting trail, and they just didn't this year. I think they got 2 bigs that they needed, and I think that's great. So I'm not going to say they had a bad year, but I did maybe expect a little bit more from them. I maybe expected them to pull a top 25 recruit or a couple top 50 recruits or something, and it just didn't happen for them this year. But they've got plenty of talent already on the team, and they recruited by need, I think. They knew what they needed, and they weren't just going to go get guys just because they were highly ranked. So, they did what they had to do. I don't think it was a bad recruiting season for them, but it was a little underwhelming, I guess I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very fair assessment, very fair take. And one school that I kind of saw in going to the ACC, Virginia. Yes, you'll say the big thing. They lost Tyson Simpson. He left the program, and that left a very big hole in the size department. And their only commit of note is Cole Webb. So that is disappointing to me that they didn't really go out and get, say, a true big man or someone with some length to kind of step in and fill that role of what Tyson Simpson gave them.
Yeah, and unfortunately, they got the Tyson Simpson news a little late in the recruiting cycle, and this was not a super deep class with the bigs. I would agree it was a little underwhelming. They actually only brought in 1 freshman, and that was Cole Webb. But I personally am not going to call it disappointing because I think Cole Webb is another guy whose game, to me, is more fit for the college level. So I'm actually really excited to see what he can do. But I would agree that it's underwhelming. Virginia is a very notable program, and they didn't have quite the class we might have expected.
Yeah, I think that's safe to say. And I knew coming into the show today at some point, I wanted to talk about these guys, Siege. I've been impressed by them throughout the entirety of the recruiting cycle. I want to talk about the running Rebels from UNLV. Man, these guys absolutely crushed it on the recruiting trail. Got the number 1 player in the state in Jarrell Beauchamp, who absolutely exploded this past season in SimWorld Prep. They shock a lot of people and pull Sky Durant from across the country. And they beat out Arizona for, the Arizona player Keontae Smythe, excuse me. So I really like what Coach Kevin Kruger did to sort of, try and bring UNLV basketball back to the success that they experienced, 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah, I would love to see this team kind of make a resurgence, this UNLV team. Bring back the running Rebels. Bring back the running Rebels, J-Rock. I think this is a team to watch. I think their biggest grab, Jarrell Beauchamp is a big grab. I'm not gonna lie, that's a huge grab. I think their biggest grab was Keontae Smythe, because you look at the roster they had before. What they were lacking was a little bit of interior defense. Guess who is one of the best interior defenders in this class? Oh, you could make an argument that he's the best interior defender in the class.
Absolutely.
You probably would lose it with guys like Big V in the mix, but that's a great grab for them. I really liked what they did. They not only were able to recruit for talent and top tier talent, but they were able to recruit by need as well. So incredibly impressed by UNLV, and I hope that they're able to play as well as they recruited.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is the next big storyline for them. Okay, you bring in all of these guys, but can you develop them and can you play them? And we've seen it, unfortunately, all too many times that be the case in a lot of places, where school brings in, say, a stellar recruiting class, maybe a school that doesn't normally get in this conversation like a UNLV, but they're not able to sort of have success with that group.
Success will be found.
Yeah, I believe success will definitely be found with this group as well. And to wrap up the show today, Siege, I wanted to swing it back to you for another question. And we'll kind of two-way this. Who is one player that maybe not necessarily was the most notable, in terms of names or stars, whatever, what have you, but who is one player that you really like the decision of where they decided to go and how that will be for their development?
I actually really love one of the very last ones we saw, Victorious Ilgauskas. I think he really took his time. I won't act like he didn't take his time. But I think he made the right decision for him. I think Duke is a very prestigious program. I think there's room in that front court for him. He gets to play with a guy he already knows, especially being, from another country and things like that. I think it's really going to help him to be there with someone that he is already familiar with. And that is, that would be Cooper Flagg, who he played with on the Originators. I really liked that selection for him. It took him a while to get there, but he got there. And I'm excited to see what he can do with that very storied program.
Yeah, definitely. And one player and I don't think a lot of people are going to be expecting the name I'm about to say, but I've always been a fan of this player's specific game, and what he did maybe didn't necessarily get a lot of run as a top option, or maybe even a 2 or a 3 option at times. But Donovan Bird-Culver, committing to Wisconsin, 6'4" forward, can alternate between the wing and, the backcourt, can score from deep, can score in just about every way, maybe has a bit of room to grow as a defender, but I like what Coach Greg Gard can do, and I think with his system at Wisconsin, Culver's style will fit in very nicely, like a glove almost there, and I think that's the ideal place for him to develop the rest of his game.
Yeah, I do like that pick for him. A little less notable, but still make the right pick even if you're not a big recruit. There's still plenty of schools out there that will give you the right fit.
Absolutely, that goes without question. And wrapping up the show today, Siege, thank you for joining me, man. It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure, brother. Always is.
All right, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in to the J-Rock Show. We'll see you on the next one. And as always, see the game, be the game.